Factoring trinomials really has two types of trinomials that we're going to look at. A value that has an a that cannot be factored out, or a value that has an a as a 1. So when we're dealing with a as a 1, these are kind of referred to as simple trinomials because there's not a whole lot else that you can have other than your two variables at the start of the brackets. So again, when we're factoring, when we're going from left to right here, we've expanded. This is expanding two binomials, and it becomes a trinomial. When we go back the other way, we're factoring, and we're going to have our trinomial turning into two binomials. So when we're looking at this, it's actually quite easy to do. It just takes some simple algebra. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write the two brackets with the x at the front. Now, that x, it can actually be any variable. It's not always x. So this is the variable at the front. However, a lot of the times when we're dealing with this, we're actually going to be dealing with x, and it's going to be telling us a little bit more information about what we're looking at. The next thing that we're going to look at is we need to find two numbers that are going to multiply to our c value. So if we look at our equation, we've got x squared plus bx plus c. So we need to multiply to our c, and the sign does matter, and add to our b value. And again, the sign does matter. So we're going to always check our answer by just expanding out what we had. Our answer is always on the page. We can always double check if we need to. So if I looked at this first value, we need to multiply to positive 3 and add to negative 4. Well, we've got x as our variable, so we're going to start off by putting our two sets of brackets. We're going to put our x at the front, and then we need to multiply to a positive and add to a negative. Well, the only way to do that is to have two negative values, a negative and a negative. A negative and a negative make a positive, and they also add to a negative value. So now the only way to actually multiply to 3 is 1 and 3. 1 times 3 is 3. Two negatives make a positive, so we've got our positive 3. And then negative 1 plus negative 3 is equal to negative 4, so we know we're correct. Looking at the second one, again, we have x as our variable, so we're going to start by two brackets. Put our x, because x times x is going to give me x squared. And then when we're looking at this, we need two numbers that multiply to 40 and add to 14. Well, there's a bunch of different ways we can multiply to 40. We could go 40 and 1. But if I did 40 and 1, the way I kind of think about this is 40 plus 1 is 41. 40 minus 1 is 39. So neither of those are 14. That doesn't work. We could do 2 and 20. We could get 22 or 18. So neither of those work. The next one I'd look at is 4 and 40. Or sorry, 4 and 10, not 4 and 40. 4 and 10, so 4 plus 10 is 14. Okay, well that works. That's the number that we need. So now I need to look at my signs. We're multiplying to a positive, and we're adding to a positive, so both of these are going to be positive. And then I'm just going to make it 4 and 10. Now if I wanted to expand this out, just to check, all I'm going to do is I would have x times x is x squared. I'm just foiling this. X times 10 is 10x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times 10 is 40. Simplify that, and we get what we had at the start, so we know we're correct. Let's move on to something like this. Now we've got x again at the start. Well, that's kind of easy. We're ending in a positive value, so we know we're going to have two negatives here because we're adding to a negative. And now we just need to look at it. Is it 12 and 1? Is it 6 and 2? Or is it 4 and 3? Those are all the ways we can multiply to 12. Well, in this case, I know 3 plus 4 is going to give me 7. Both negatives makes it negative 7. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12, so I'm right. This one's going to be a little bit harder. Now notice that we're not using x this time, so we're going to put our a's in front. That's our variable. Now we're multiplying to a negative number. So what that means is that we're going to have one positive and one negative. We need to get -4 as what we've added to. So what that tells me is that I need two numbers that multiply together, that if I subtract them, I'm going to get 4, and the bigger number is going to be negative because we're adding to -4. So the only way to get 21 is 1 and 21, or 3 and 7. Now I know 21 minus 1 is 20, so that doesn't work. But 7 minus 3 gives me 4. So I know it's 7 and 3, but I need to have a bigger number to be negative because I have to add to -4. So that's the way I'm going to write it. If you were to write, so if you came through and you wrote this instead, it's the exact same. There's nothing wrong with that. You would get full marks. If you think about it this way, if I gave you a question and said, what's a way that you can multiply to 6? And some of the students wrote 2 times 3, and some students wrote 3 times 2. They're both equally as correct. They both equal 6. So both of those would be fine. It doesn't matter what order you put them in, so long as you have both of the brackets. If we look at something like this, people will say, well, Mr. Shaw, you've got a 3 in front here. That's not what we were talking about. Well, what I have to notice is that all of these terms actually divide by 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to common factor first, and that's what we should always be looking for. Can we common factor first? And now I'm going to be left with n squared, but if you look, I've actually made a mistake here, and I've got to be careful because I factored out a negative. And when I went to the next term, a negative and a positive would have given me the wrong answer. So this has to be negative now because I've taken a negative out of all of the values. Well, that also means that this has to be negative. So we're left with -3 times n squared. Well, that's right. That's -3n squared. Minus n, -3 times -n would give me +3n. Minus 30, -3 times -30 would give me +90. So now I'm good. Now I need to just keep writing that 3 down, and I'm going to start my 2 brackets. I'm going to put an n at the front this time. And there's also another little hint here. I know I'm going to have a positive and a negative. I know my bigger number is going to be negative because this value is negative. But I also know that my numbers are going to be 1 digit apart because it's just -n. So I have to get 1 as my answer when I add them together or subtract them. So in this case, I know that the numbers that are 1 number apart are 5 and 6 that multiply to 30. We know that the bigger number has to be negative, so it's going to be +5 and -6. For this last type, what we're looking at is we've got values of x squared and y squared. Well, if we forget all of the other numbers, normally what I've been doing is I've just been putting an x at the start of both of my brackets. Well, if I've got a y squared at the end, why can't I just put a y at the end of both of my brackets? And we'll expand this out to show you at the end, but that's going to take care of all of my other terms. Now I need 2 numbers that multiply to -48 and add to 2. Well, if I'm multiplying to -48 and I'm adding to 2, what I need to consider is 2 numbers that are 2 numbers apart, but the signs have to be different again because I've got a positive that I'm adding to, but I'm multiplying to a negative. So we're going to have a plus and a minus. We know they're 2 numbers apart, but in this case, the bigger number is positive. So 2 numbers apart that multiply to 48 are going to be 6 and 8. 8 times 6 is 48. Bigger number is positive. Let's multiply these together. So we're going to FOIL them out. X times x is x squared. X times -6 is -6xy. 8y times x would be plus 8xy, and then minus 48 y squared. We collect like terms in the middle here. We get x squared plus 2xy minus 48y squared, and we've confirmed that we're correct.